Hi, Pete.
Hi.
So we're here on another beautiful day, about 2 weeks later, series
Yep.
2 in our B series.
Yep.
How did you end up doing this? How long have you been doing this?
Well, back in mid 70s, maybe 74, 75, I was a undergraduate student at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and I used to go on the weekends to the Thieves Market in Seven Corners, Virginia, and rumble around in old toolboxes and book boxes, and I found a book for 50 cents on beekeeping in one of these boxes, and I bought it, read it, thought it looked pretty cool. So I ordered my first hive kit, knocked it together, enlisted myself with the fire department and police department in Washington, D.C., available to capture a swarm. And as it has it, the first call I got, the swarm had landed on the Capitol building of Washington, D.C., and I got a call from the Capitol Police. Went over there, drove up in my Volkswagen Rabbit, got out the ladder and swept the bees into a box off of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C.
That's really smoking whatever you have there. Why? What does that do?
Well, smoking the bees calms them down, and there are two theories as to why it calms them down. Theory number one, if you're a beehive in a tree in the woods in a forest and you smell smoke, what does that mean? Where there's smoke, there's
Fire.
So it causes the worker bees to go to their honey stores, load up their honey stomach, and get ready to flee the tree that they have their hive in case the fire comes their way. So when they're full of honey, well, think about your husband. When he has had a steak and potato meal, what does he do? He lays down and takes a nap. That's theory number one. Theory number two is bees communicate via pheromones. So pheromones are like scents. The queen has a smell like lemongrass. The alarm pheromone that the bees put out when they're under attack smells sort of like nail polish remover or old bananas. You know, that kind of sweet acetone smell. And you can actually smell this. So if I get stung, they'll hit me with the alarm pheromone. And if I don't take the smoker and smoke where I just got stung, I'll get stung in the same place 2 or 3 times by other bees attracted to the scent.
Wow.
So that's the second theory behind smoking, which is basically you're interrupting the way in which they communicate from within the hive. You know, so if there's alarm pheromone, you smoke them, they don't smell the alarm pheromone.
Wow. So what's been going on here since we put these Canadian bees in here? Oh, what, 8 to 10,000 of them 2 weeks ago?
Well, the queen has been out and about, hopefully, and accepted within the hive, and that's what we're going to check on. The feed that we gave them 2 weeks ago will carry them through. We've had pretty wet, rainy, cool weather. They haven't been able to get out and collect their own food source, but they have it all within the hive via the feed that I put in there. At this point, there's no need to refill because there's plenty of forage for them to have in bloom, and they also, if we get another cold snap or rainy snap, they have food within the hive. And we'll take a peek. So what I'm going to do today is look and see if we can't spot the queen, and if she has successfully been accepted in the hive, she will have started laying eggs, and we should see some eggs and larvae.
Wow.
And if we do spot her, I'm going to take her and mark her with the color blue, which is the color for this year's queen in the international color system.
How does that work?
Well, so this gives you a way of knowing how old your queen is and when it would be a good time to replace her. Right now she is unmarked. And also if they do replace her, because I have marked the queen, and I come back here later in the summer and we see an unmarked queen, roaming around the hive. We know that they've decided that she was not a acceptable queen, and they've replaced her.
So Pete, why can't you just use a Sharpie? What's this all about, the color and the color that gets selected? That sounds like a pretty formal process of marking.
Yeah, there's an international color scheme that all beekeepers use for marking the queen. This allows you to be able to determine how old your queen is in a given box. This year the color is blue, last year it was green. And this enables me to do a couple of things, which is if I look at an established box, I can tell how old my queen is. Or if we come back later in the season to this box and we don't see a queen that's marked blue running around in there, we know that the worker bees have made the decision collectively that they needed to replace the queen.
Go ahead. So I know you're looking for the queen. Can I ask, you mentioned they might decide that they're not keen on the queen anymore?
Yeah,
is that a big deal when that happens?
Yeah, so say she didn't get mated very well, and she runs out of sperm and starts laying drones in there. Eventually the hive will die, or if she is injured in any of this process here, the bees can detect this, the worker bees can detect this through the queen's pheromones. Again, I said,
the lemongrass.
They really communicate with each other through pheromones. And if they have a good, healthy, productive queen, they'll spread the queen scent throughout the entire hive, and the hive will be calm and happy. If the queen is injured, then they pick up on that and they take an egg that's under 3 days old and they start feeding it royal jelly, and that egg will develop into a replacement queen.
Wow.
Aging queen.
That is so
Again,
incredible.
it's all done through smell and pheromones. And actually, I'm thinking the queen is like somewhere around here, because this little behavior, now they stopped doing it. This little behavior here, the fanning behavior that you see on this bee, but you don't see the little butt up in the air.
The butt's not up.
That's not homing. That's her spreading the queen scent around the rest of the hive.
With her wings.
With her wings.
Wow.
So the first thing I look at before I really go through is I want to see how many frames that the bees are actually occupying and working on, and that tells me roughly what my population is. And so this side doesn't count, but this side does count, right? And if you look at this, it's 1, 2, 3, 4.5. So a package is about 3-4 pounds of bees. That was a good sized package in this. This is more like close to 5 pounds worth of bees.
Wow.
So if you look in this area here, you can see liquid in these cells. See these bees with their heads in the cells working right here? They're actually working on the nectar and or sugar water that they gave us. And that's the sugar water that they're starting to put from our feeder into the cells. Still looking for the queen. This one is being pretty elusive. I haven't spotted her yet, but if I smoke the bees off this area, you can see the 3 stages. There's some larvae in this area, and there's older larvae that they've capped over so that they can pupate into adult bee here. Let me hold this up for you and turn it around so you can see it in the sunlight. Can you see in the bottom a little white C-shaped larvae in this area here? So when they're 8 to 10 days old, they cap them over like this so that they can pupate. And there should be eggs on this frame here. They're hard to spot. Let me look. if you look and sort of go outwards this way, I mean, it looks like the queen laid in a spiral pattern. So as you get wider and wider, you can see the larvae are younger and younger and smaller here.
So are you pretty certain that obviously the queen bee's been active?
Well, so at day 10 is when they cap these over. So these larvae here, the little tiny ones, were laid maybe 3 to 5 days ago. So the queen has been active in this hive 3 to 5 days ago. And actually, well, it's hard to spot.
So is it possible that, I mean, obviously you've been doing this for quite some time, that she's right there somewhere, but she's really good at sort of being elusive?
Well, sometimes if she's laying, her longer abdomen is in the cell and she's harder to spot. But there's some fanning activity I see here that makes me suspect that she may or may not be on this frame somewhere. But I guess this queen is a shy queen. She's not showing herself. Well, I'm going to smoke these, and I have to be careful when I lay this down because I don't want to squish her. Let's move these guys around a little bit. These gals. It's a warm enough day, so I'm not risking chilling the brood, but this is a good area that I can show you the larvae, where you see this C-shaped white larvae. So those are probably 7 days after hatching, almost ready to be capped over.
I love watching their wings flap up the right track.
Yeah.
Hey, do you ever get over the wonder, the miracle of this all? Do you ever?
Oh, never.
It's so utterly amazing.
I'm a
and
total nerd.
wondrous.
My kids used to say my dad's the nerd. He keeps bugs in boxes.
I think this is just such it's just uplifting. It's so hopeful. It's what the world needs right now. My goodness.
There she is.
Ah!
There she is, right there. Can you see her? If you look, her abdomen, watch your shadow here. Let's change the angle a little bit. There you go. Can you see her? Right there. See how her abdomen is longer than her wings, unlike the worker bees? And her abdomen is pointy.
I gotta say, Pete, it would take me a really long time to make that distinction.
Well, she also moves differently on the comb. If you look at how she's moving compared to the other bees, so it's more the movement that catches your eye when you know what to look for.
So now that you've identified her, you're going to get your working pen ready?
Yes, and I'm going to put a blue dot on her thorax.
And that doesn't harm them, or
No,
obviously
so
it doesn't,
there's a
but-
technique. I mean, if you think of their wings as a handle to pick them up by, you can actually put good pressure there without squashing her or injuring her in any way. And so you pick her up by the wings with one hand, and with your other hand, let her reach out and grab your fingers, and then you grab her legs to hold her in place. And then you mark the dot on, and you let the dot dry. Then you grab the handles, the wings again, and then let her reach out to grab the comb and let her go. So
That's crazy.
we'll see if we can
Pete.
do that. Now I got to find her again because I was looking at you.
How long did it take you to learn how to do that? Just this one thing, the marking.
It's not hard. So if you're uncomfortable with that, they do make queen cages where you can just basically isolate the queen and mark her through a mesh on the queen cage. So I'm going to wait for her to turn around. I'm going to put the pen in my hand. She's facing the wrong direction. So I'm left-handed. So I need to pick her up with my left hand, hold her with my right, and mark her with my left. So bees
how are
have
the other
5
bees?
eyes. 3 of them are on the back of their head. So if my shadow goes over, she's aware that a potential predator is there.
Now, how will the other bees react when you start to lift her?
Well, if I don't injure her, it's fine. So she's making it difficult. See, I've got her wing. I want her to reach out, grab her legs.
Oh, look at her. She's gorgeous.
Now we want to let that dry because it interferes with her smell. Again, I grab her wings, which are the handles, and she'll reach out and grab the comb. I can let her go.
Wow.
She's a little upset.
So they can't detect an odor from the marker pen?
They can. So, but this was a quick dry wand. It's pretty standard paint pen.
Wow. Such a pretty
you can
blue
get,
they chose this. Yeah.
You can get water-based, or you can get, you know, water-based pens don't smell, but they take longer to dry. So now I'm going to carefully, I know she's on this frame, I'm going to carefully close this up here.
This is probably a silly question, but do the other bees know that something's on her? Do they want to take it off her
You
from
know,
working?
last year, whatever green pen brand I had, they would try to lick it off all the time. I'd come back a week later and it'd be half licked off. But I can't tell what brand this is. This is the 3rd cycle I've been using this blue pen. So all the lettering is moved off on it. So basically, I'm done. I can't tell how much they've eaten from the feeder, and I can judge it by weight. It's still pretty heavy, so I would say it's about, they've eaten maybe half a gallon
Is that
of syrup.
pretty typical for?
Well, it depends. What was the weather like since we were here last?
It was.
We only had 3 days like this, right?
It's been chilly.
It's been chilly, so if they can't get out to collect, then they'll eat more. So we saw brood on 2 frames, basically. If they're brood on 10 frames, they're going to need more food to feed the babies. So this is a growing hive. It's not that big yet.
You could have fooled me. Goodness
No.
gracious.
Not that big yet. And so that's the reason why, you know, I feel comfortable working without a veil or gloves, because these are mostly young bees, and it's only a small amount of bees, and they don't have a large amount of stores in the hive that they want to protect. When it comes later in the summer, you know, July, August, and other colonies are robbing each other out, they're far more aggressive, and I'll be in full costume at that point.
You know, I'm so glad that you dressed up, because just watching you these last 2 weeks with your bare hands, it's pretty incredible. I attribute to the fact that you're a bee whisperer, but it's good to know that you have to safeguard even.
Zoom in on this worker bee. Do you see her back legs? That's where she has her pollen baskets, and she collects the pollen. Pollen is the protein source that the bees have, and the nectar and honey is their energy source. And the bees will mix the pollen and the nectar together in what's called bee bread. And I think there was a frame with some of that on it.
Bee bread.
And that's what they feed to the growing larvae.
Wow.
So this is mostly nectar. It'll be on, the bee bread will be on the frame next to where we saw the larvae. So you can see in these cells the yellow pollen being stored up. Typically, you'll have a ring area of brood and a ring area of pollen, and then the outer area will be honey and nectar sources.